Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to start our lesson, whatever, on weathering and erosion. And so to begin, I would like to share with you an information moment, an information time where we're going to either review weathering and erosion or we're going to learn what it is, one or the other. Okay. So by the time we get done with this, you are responsible for understanding what weathering is, what erosion is, what deposition is, and how they're all interrelated. And then I am going to lead you on to the next activity, which is going to be the STEM part of this activity. Okay, so let's just start off by understanding weathering, erosion, and deposition. So the Earth's surface is constantly changing, and we can see this by looking at pictures and photographs over the years. This is a picture of Mount St. Helens in 1980. Picture on the left is before it was had erupted, and the picture on the right was after. So this is just proof that this particular change happened instantly. But some things happen instantly, but there are other things that happen gradually over time. New land is constantly being formed. It can be done through volcanoes and their eruptions. It can be done through forces deep in the earth that push up mountains, mountain chains. Changes can also be done by wind, water, and ice. So this particular example is showing you 3 different plateaus, which were all originally the same height, and wind has weathered them down. So weathering, what exactly does that mean? Weathering is the breaking down of rock into smaller and smaller pieces, as you see here. So I want you to think about weathering as being the hammer. The weathering, it breaks, and we get the smaller things, the smaller rocks, excuse me. Things in nature that cause weathering: water in the cracks of rocks can freeze and expand and break them apart. Plant roots can cause it. Water runs over rocks, causing the rocks to hit each other, break apart. Wind carries sand and can wear down rocks. And then carbon dioxide creates an acid that can dissolve water and eat holes in the rocks. Water in the crack of a rock would look, here's an example of what it would look like. So water seeps in, it gets cold, it freezes, and when water freezes, it expands. And that's what causes the rock to break. Expanding water as it freezes slowly breaks up this rock into unusual shapes. So you can get some, pretty jagged lines right here, which I could definitely see how I could see how and connect that to freezing water. But this one right here is unique and the water causes the rock to form in unusual shapes. Plant roots is another example that can cause weathering. So when they squeeze in between the rock right there, as the tree grows, the rock separates from itself. Weathering caused by running water. When water in waterfalls, in rivers or streams move over the rocks are weathered, which again means broken into smaller pieces. Fast running water causes rocks to hit one another. So here you have some canyons. The Grand Canyon is another example of this. It's fast moving water that causes rocks to hit each other and break apart. Weathering by wind. As the wind blows, it picks up small particles of sand and blasts large rocks with the abrasive particles, cutting shapes into the rocks. So this particular rock was larger at the base at one time, but the sand around it caused the abrasion and made it go smaller. Glaciers is another thing. Glaciers is a form of ice. A glacier is a large river of ice that moves very slowly downhill. And their glaciers are formed over many years with large amounts of snow that have fallen and accumulate, and they pack together. And the snow then changes into ice. So the glacier here is right down the middle, right there. So weathering can be caused by glaciers. Stuck in the bottom of the glacier are stones of various sizes that wear away the rock under the glacier as it moves downhill. Carbon dioxide dissolves in water and weathers rock. CO2 dissolves in rainwater and creates carbonic acid. Carbonic acid easily weathers limestone, making holes in the rock, as you can see here. Erosion. Now that we understand what weathering is, remember weathering is the breaking apart. Now let's understand what erosion is. Erosion is the process by which water, ice, wind, or gravity moves the pieces of rock and soil. So weathering makes the small pieces. Erosion is the movement of those small pieces. When rock is weathered or broken, these pieces are often carried away by water, wind, or ice. So the erosion here is the movement of the sand or rock particles down at the bottom of this valley. I don't know, I can't tell how big it is. So water erosion is an example. This is where rivers, streams, and runoff carried weathered rock or soil to another place. So the breaking down of the bed here, the riverbed, and it changes over time, and that dirt or that rock is moved and taken downstream. Fast moving streams and rivers carry big and small rocks downstream. Slower moving water carries smaller rocks and soil downstream. So it doesn't really matter. If you've got movement in the water, then you're going to have some type of erosion, whether it's fast moving water or slow moving rock. Obviously, fast moving water can move more, but slow moving water moves soil as well. Moving water can also cause soil erosion, carrying the soil away to a different location. There's that example again. Wind is another type of erosion. Strong winds can move small rocks and soil from one location to another. This is a dust storm. The dust storm is moving the sand, which is small rocks, and they will be deposited somewhere else later. And the plateau example that I gave you at the beginning is another example of wind erosion. Ice is another way that things can be eroded. Glaciers moving over the rocks. It moves those rocks as the glacier moves. So not only does the glacier break down the mountain, but it also moves and carries the smaller rock with it. This looks like a highway, but it is actually a glacier. Deposition. So we've talked about weathering, we've talked about erosion, and now we're going to talk about deposition. So weathering, remember, is the breaking of the rock. Erosion is the carrying of the broken pieces. Deposition is the act of depositing or putting it down somewhere. So you think about it as breaking down, carrying, and depositing. Put it down. When the water slows down or stops moving, the wind dies down or it stops blowing, or when the glacier melts, the rock that the water, the wind, or the glacier were carrying are deposited or dropped in a new location. Delta is an example of water deposition. Where the river meets the ocean is called the mouth of the river. Soil carried by the river is deposited at the mouth and new land is formed with this new rich soil, and it's known as a delta. This can be a very slow way that islands are formed. So whatever was upriver gets carried all the way down here and is deposited in the delta of the river or the mouth. Wind deposition. Wind can also carry things. Sand dunes, like the one we just saw with the example of the playground. That's not a sand dune, that was a dust storm, sorry. Sand dunes are large deposits of sand dropped when the wind stopped blowing. The location of the sand dunes shift frequently. Glacial deposition, we talked about already. When glaciers melt, they drop or deposit the rocks where they were carrying them. So this is a former glacier right here, and this particular glacier extended all the way out here where we see these small rocks. So the glacier has melted. And so when it melted, it left these rocks behind. So this is an example of deposition. Although we talk about weathering, erosion, and deposition as three separate processes, they often occur together. This is the interrelation that I'm going to be asking for a little bit later. How are they interrelated, meaning working together? Over time, rocks are generally broken into smaller pieces, which is weathering. Then they are carried downhill, which is erosion, and then they are deposited in a new location. This is deposition, as you see here. Do you remember the agents of weathering? Moving water, water freezing in cracks, glaciers, plant roots, wind. Now, do you remember the agents of erosion? And you'll see some commonalities here. Moving water can be used as an agent of weathering, but can also be used as an agent of erosion. Wind, again, glaciers. So they can be used as both. All right. Now that you've watched this, go to the next step in the directions.